You really can't blame id for barfing out projects left and right. The legendary developer tends to take its time with each game it creates, resulting in a lot of hype by the time it reaches store shelves. Yet it's also incredibly smart with how it shares information, and with its latest first-person shooter RPG hybrid, Rage, we've been left in the dark in a lot of ways. Will it prove that ignorance is bliss?
Well, I guess you don't know anything about any of this. Welcome to the future.
Earth has suffered a catastrophic collision with an asteroid, forcing mankind to secure the planet's most gifted denizens inside capsules called arks. When the dust settles, the survivors are forced into factions, warring for valuable resources, small makeshift encampments are formed, bandits roam the dunes looking for marks, and mutant creatures are running amok. You play as the lone survivor of an ark who awakens to a vastly changed world. Swap flying cars for blimps and the space age for the Dust Bowl, and you're close to the future according to Rage. Minus the game's outset, you're not beaten over the head with the game's story via elaborate cinemas. In the few movies that are included, the writing can come off as rote, and you'll gain the majority of the insight from talking to NPCs.
Great! Muy bueno! We are simpático, eh?
There's no real latitude here to shape the story, no real plot-shaping decisions to make, and the game ends rather abruptly with the lack of a proper build-up. Still, it's a well-realized world with many interesting characters to befriend and bemoan along the way. There's an oppressive faction called the Authority trying to rule amongst the anarchy, and a resistance group trying to thwart them. It's all the motivation you need, yet it fails in building a true hatred for the antagonists.
What the fuck?
Rage gives the appearance of an open-world game, but it's mostly smoke and mirrors. There are 3 main towns to submerge yourself in, and they're all connected by a network of dusty trails called the Wasteland. Leave or enter a location, and you're subjected to loading times, and there's not much to do while going from point A to point B aside from fending off bandit buggy attacks. It's much closer to Fallout 3 than Grand Theft Auto.
It ain't safe here. Get in.
You begin the campaign by being rescued from your ark, and you're taken to the first of 3 towns. Within these confines, you're able to talk to NPCs to get missions, play a handful of different minigames for cash, or hit the shops to upgrade just about everything imaginable. Your armor, buggy, and weapons all feature multiple layers of improvements, and the game is well balanced, ensuring that you're never too powerful for the trials to come. It may take place in the future, but with a couple exceptions, Rage is not about alien superweapons and far-flung technology. You have traditional armaments like machine guns, shotguns, and pistols, with ammo upgrades like mind control bolts for the crossbow, keeping things interesting. Crafting items is a big part of the game, and collecting trash and trinkets littered around the world will allow you to build things that help in myriad ways. Some are as simple as drills to open locked doors, while others, like the sentry turret and sentry bot, can be valuable allies when the cards are stacked against you. While you still get the occasional fetch quest, the missions doled out by NPCs truly run the gamut in style and length. Sometimes it's as simple as traveling through the wasteland to obtain an important piece of technology, but other times you're forced to infiltrate bandit camps, and these objectives can take almost an hour to complete. You're free to take multiple missions at once, but the game's waypoint system always points you in the direction of the main path. Side missions aren't something to ignore since you're sometimes rewarded with new weapons for completing them, and overall, Rage keeps the objectives varied, challenging, fun, and rewarding. Though the Xbox 360 version comes loaded on a whopping 3 discs, do not be fooled. Completing the main campaign will take anywhere from 10 to 12 hours depending on how many side missions you complete. And the 3rd disc is used strictly for multiplayer. Speaking of which, Rage does not include the typical deathmatch modes you'd expect from a first-person shooter. In fact, it doesn't include any competitive shooting at all. The main multiplayer component is buggy-based racing and combat for up to 4 players. This seems surprising coming from a developer like id, but it's given the same care to the vehicle shenanigans as it would have to a more rote shooter suite. There are 3 primary game types, with one asking you to collect falling asteroids and deliver them to moving zones, and another that tasks you with being the first to 3 consecutive checkpoints to score. You also get the typical deathmatch, and thanks to the ability to upgrade your buggy with new parts and power-ups as you gain levels, there's more than enough motivation to return to what could best be described as a gritty Mario Kart. You also get a cooperative mode for up to 4 players called Wasteland Legends that utilizes traditional first-person shooter gameplay. The environments for these self-contained missions are ripped straight out of the main campaign, and they run the gamut from staying alive a la Horde mode to reaching the end in one piece. They scale well based upon the number of players involved and provide an easy DLC angle because they're not being squeezed into the main story arc. Rage features a ton of distraction in addition to the main quest, providing the opportunity for an expansive RPG. It's a little disappointing that it ends just as the world and its inhabitants start to truly come to life, but what's here is unquestionably interesting. The multiplayer options are surprisingly compelling, so despite a brief campaign by RPG standards, the content is worth the asking price.
How dare you think you can walk into our house?
Many credit id as the creators of the first-person shooter, so you'd expect the mechanics to be on point. For the most part, they are. Movement, aiming, and firing are all handled well and benefit from a blistering 60 frames per second the engine supplies. It can literally take some time to get used to how responsive and fast the game plays. You won't realize how important this is until you're mobbed by half a dozen enemies that are all diving at you hoping to slash your throat. It simply never fluctuates in its speed or response. While id's signature monster closets have gladly been relieved of their duties, the rate at which enemies attack more than make up for those lost, tense moments. Every last button on the controller is used, and some even do double duty as modifiers to allow you to switch weapons and ammo types. Aiming is smooth, scoped or not, though we did have some slight hit detection issues when firing through obstacles. Most importantly, the feel of firing each weapon is unique and satisfying, highlighted by the shotgun that includes that special id sauce that players have come to know and love. That's not to say that the game is one big circle strafe. There's a great ebb and flow to combat. One section will task you with wiping out swarming mutants, while the next will require a more thoughtful, strategic approach as you take angles and pick off enemies with long-range weapons. Others will have you pondering your loadout and targeting as you're presented with new enemy types. What makes playing the game so unique is enemy behavior. It's completely unpredictable. Rarely will enemies simply sprint in a straight line. They'll dodge, spin, climb, leap, retreat, take cover, making every single battle something to remember. Its importance can't be overstated, and in conjunction with the stodgy safe checkpoints, we recommend hard saving constantly. When the rebounding health falters and you're taken down, you're brought to a minigame to revive yourself. Once back on your feet, there's a set amount of time before you can use the defibrillator again. Die during this time and you face final death. Like just about everything else in the game, it can eventually be upgraded, but Rage will definitely keep you on your toes. The buggies control predominantly well, and many of the initial shortcomings can be rectified with a few parts upgrades. A driving sim it's not, and you're essentially tasked with handling gas, brakes, weapons, and power-ups. It's handled elegantly with enough depth to provide an opportunity for advanced play. Rage's role-playing elements do not approach the depths of a game like Dark Souls, but they're cleverly streamlined. Junk that you collect is clearly labeled, so you don't have to fear selling a component integral to crafting, and all the trinkets you procure are grouped together as junk that you can sell at shops in a single button press. The majority of minigames are simple one-button affairs with the exception of the card battle game called Rage Frenzy. Here you build a deck from cards you find scattered around the world and compete with NPCs. It's a nice touch, but it's a bit too random for the long term, and you can't play it online against other humans. Coming from one of the grandfathers of the genre, it's no surprise that Rage is a great playing first-person shooter. What's most shocking is that the RPG elements are handled so well. With so many things to see and do, it's a near-perfect mix of gunplay, racing, and exploration that never settles into a grind. A lot has been made about id's new engine and its use of mega textures. Essentially, it's one large texture draped over the landscape instead of a collection of smaller textures. It frees up a lot of RAM, and it shows in the speed that the engine delivers. The drawback is that many of the textures can look a bit blurry when viewed up close. It also fosters absolute brutal loading times that can be remedied by installing the game to the hard drive. That said, the trade-off is well worth it. Rage is still an extremely sharp-looking game from a technical perspective, and despite the repetitive, dust-blown doldrums of the wasteland, there's some fantastic art direction hidden in its crevices. The game would do well with a few more enemy types, and the NPCs are a little rough around the edges, but the team has done an amazing job creating a completely believable future that's a cross between steampunk and the Old West. Small touches like the Authority slowly taking over each town as time goes by only helps immerse you in this fantastically bleak world.
Excellent work. Just give me a second to analyze this data.
The audio isn't quite as successful. The voice work is adequate and NPC chatter changes based upon your in-game exploits, but it's undermined by a ho-hum script.
I'm Dan Hager, and you are one lucky son of a bitch.
While the weapon reports lack punch, and the buggies sound like lawnmowers. The orchestral music sets the right tone, but it is a bit out of place at times. Rage is a perfect example of why we try to stay as uninformed as possible before reviewing a game. We never imagined that the RPG elements would be so vast or deftly handled, resulting in a pleasant surprise. A near-perfect mix of first-person shooting and role-playing, it's a nice fit for those who feel too detached from the gunplay in Fallout 3 or Mass Effect. Some may bemoan the lack of competitive multiplayer shooting, but when there are dozens of games on the horizon that do just that, the vehicular approach is the right one. With tons of variety, an interesting world to explore, and a high level of polish, Rage is not what you expect, but exactly what you didn't know you wanted.